The engine wasn't idling, it was growling. At 6:45 in the morning, the heavy rumble of diesel vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom. I rolled over, blinking against the pale Oregon light, and for a second I thought it was just a tractor from the neighboring farm. Then I heard the voices. I pulled back the curtain. Parked directly across my driveway, blocking any chance of exit, was a massive yellow moving truck. The back gate was already open, and standing right next to it, looking like he'd just conquered a kingdom, was my brother Brandon. He wasn't cleaning up from the wedding. He wasn't packing away the leftover wine cases or the rental chairs. He was unloading boxes. I watched as he pointed to the front door, my front door, directing two movers who were carrying a leather sofa I recognized from his apartment. I didn't scream. I didn't even open the window. I just walked downstairs, my bare feet cold on the hardwood I had paid to restore plank by plank. When I opened the front door, Brandon turned. He was holding a coffee cup in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. He didn't look guilty, he looked inevitable. "Morning, sis," he said, flashing that easy golden boy grin that had gotten him out of every consequence he'd ever faced. "You're up early. Good. We need to clear out the master suite by noon." "What are you doing, Brandon?" My voice was flat, calm. He laughed, waving the paper at me. "Moving in. Mom and Dad signed it over last night. It's a gift deed. They said the vineyard is mine now." He stepped closer, his grin sharpening into something proprietary. "So you'll need to pack your stuff. You can take the guest cottage for a few weeks until you figure something out. But the main house, that's for me and Sarah." I looked at the truck. I looked at the paper. And then I looked at my brother, who truly believed he could steal a $2.5 million estate because our parents had scribbled their names on a napkin. Before I tell you how I legally dismantled my entire family in less than 24 hours, drop a comment. Have you ever had a family member try to take credit for your hard work? I read every single story. 3 months ago, this vineyard was my sanctuary. It sits on 40 acres in the Willamette Valley, tucked between rolling hills and ancient oak trees. When I bought it, it was a ruin. The vines were diseased, the main house was rotting, and the soil had been neglected for a decade. I spent 3 years bringing it back to life. I learned how to prune vines in the freezing rain. I hired contractors, managed permits, and poured every cent of my savings into the restoration. I didn't just buy this place, I bled for it. It was the first thing in my life that was entirely mine. No family strings attached, no conditions, just my sweat equity and my name on the deed. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday night. My mother, Patricia, called with that breathless, frantic tone she used whenever Brandon needed something. "Natalie, we have a crisis," she said. I put down my wine glass. "Is everyone okay?" "It's the wedding," she said. "The venue in Napa canceled. They double booked. Sarah is devastated. She's been crying for 2 days straight." I felt a twinge of sympathy. Planning a wedding is stressful. "That's terrible, Mom. Do they have a backup plan?" Well, she paused, and I should have known right then. I should have heard the trap snapping shut. We were thinking, "Your place is so beautiful now, and it's empty most of the time." "No," I said immediately. "Mom, my house isn't a venue. It's my home. And the vines are in a delicate stage right now. I can't have hundreds of people trampling them." "It wouldn't be hundreds," she protested. "Just family and close friends. Maybe 150 people. Very elegant, very quiet." "Sarah is an influencer, Mom," I reminded her. "Her idea of quiet involves a DJ and a drone fleet." "Absolutely not." "Natalie, please," my father, Richard, chimed in from the background. "We've already lost the deposit on the other place. $85,000, Natalie. Gone. If we have to book another venue this late, it will bankrupt us." $85,000. My parents had always claimed they were comfortable, but they constantly pleaded poverty whenever I needed help with tuition or a down payment. Yet for Brandon's wedding, they had $85,000 to lose. "We're desperate," my mom said, her voice cracking. "Brandon is your brother. You know how much this means to him. He's finally settling down. He's finally happy. If this wedding falls apart, it might break him." There it was. The weaponization of family duty. For my entire life, I had been taught that family meant setting myself on fire to keep Brandon warm. Family meant I was the safety net, the backup plan, the one who sacrificed so he could shine. But here's the thing about the trap of family first. It sounds noble, doesn't it? It sounds like loyalty. But in my family, family first was just a Trojan horse. It was a phrase they used to breach boundaries they would never dare cross with a stranger. If a stranger asked to use my private estate for free, after losing 85 grand, I would have laughed in their face. I would have called security. But because it was family, I was expected to say yes. Because we shared DNA, my boundaries were treated as suggestions, not laws. They counted on the fact that I would feel too guilty to say no. And the worst part, it worked. I hesitated. I looked out at my vineyard at the rows of Pinot Noir grapes just starting to ripen. I thought about my brother, who had never held a steady job for more than 6 months, marrying a woman who treated life like a photo op. Fine, I said the word tasting like ash. But there are conditions. Anything my mom promised. We'll do anything. I'm drafting a contract, I said, my voice hardening. Strict liability, 150 guest maximum. No access to the main house bedrooms. Guests stay in hotels. The event ends at 10 p.m. sharp. And if a single vine is damaged, you pay for the entire harvest. A contract, my dad sounded offended. For your brother. For my property, I corrected. Take it or leave it. They took it. They signed it 2 days later. I thought the contract would protect me. I thought legal paperwork meant something to them. I was so naive. Looking back, I realized I wasn't signing a venue agreement. I was signing a permission slip for them to destroy everything I loved. The morning of the wedding, the chaos started before the sun even hit the hills. I was in my office reviewing the final guest list they had sent over when I saw the first bus pull up. Not a shuttle, a charter bus. Then another, and another. I walked out onto the porch, my stomach tightening. The contract stated 150 guests. 3 buses alone held that many. And then the cars started arriving. A parade of luxury SUVs and rentals kicking up dust on my gravel road, parking on the grass, parking on the wildflower beds I had planted to support the local bee population. I marched down to the main tent. Brandon was standing by the bar, which was already open, at 10 a.m., holding a whiskey glass. Brandon, I said, keeping my voice low. How many people are here? He shrugged, not even looking at me. I don't know. Sarah invited a few extra friends. Her followers wanted to come. A few I gestured to the crowd swarming my lawn. There are at least 300 people here, Brandon. The septic system can't handle this. The insurance doesn't cover this. Relax, Natalie, he scoffed, taking a sip of his drink. Stop being such a buzzkill. It's a celebration. Mom and Dad said it was fine. It's not fine. You're violating the contract. Contract, he sneered, finally turning to look at me. You're pathetic, you know that. Always trying to make everything a transaction. This is family. You don't sue family. He turned his back on me and walked away, high-fiving a guy who was currently lighting a cigarette next to my dry hay bales. I found my mother near the catering tent. She was directing the florist to cut blooms from my prize rose bushes, roses that were decidedly not part of the floral package. Mom, I grabbed her arm. Stop. Those aren't for the wedding. She shook me off, looking annoyed. Don't be stingy, Natalie. They look better on the tables than in the dirt. Sarah wanted more color. I don't care what Sarah wanted. This is my house. You signed an agreement. Oh, stop it with the agreement, she snapped. Her voice was loud enough that the florist paused to watch. You're ruining his day with your jealousy, Natalie. Just because you're alone doesn't mean you have to sabotage your brother's happiness. You can afford to fix a few plants. You're rich enough. Jealousy. That was always the accusation. If I had boundaries, I was jealous. If I had success, I was lucky. If I demanded respect, I was difficult. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't a host here. I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was just a resource they felt entitled to strip mine. I stepped back. Okay, I said softly. Okay, she looked suspicious. Okay, enjoy the party. I turned and walked back to the main house. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I went into my office, locked the door, and pulled up the security camera feeds on my monitor. I sat there for 6 hours watching. I watched Sarah's friends trample the Pinot Noir vines to get the perfect sunset selfie. I watched Brandon's groomsmen dragging my antique patio furniture onto the lawn, spilling red wine on the cushions. I watched my parents laughing and drinking, basking in the compliments of guests who told them what a magnificent estate they owned. And I documented every single second. I took screenshots. I saved video clips. I cataloged every damaged vine, every broken rule, every act of disrespect. I wasn't crying. I was building a case. The party finally died down around 2 a.m. The buses left. The caterers packed up. The silence returned to the valley, heavy and bruised. I went to sleep, fully dressed my phone on the nightstand, a strange feeling of dread settling in my gut. I thought the worst was over. I thought I just had to get through the cleanup and the bill for damages. I didn't know the real invasion hadn't even started yet. When I woke up to that diesel engine, I realized the wedding wasn't the main event. It was just the Trojan horse. Brandon was standing by the truck, the morning sun, catching the gold of his new wedding band. He saw me in the doorway and smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who thinks they've already won. "You have 24 hours to clear your stuff out of the main suite," he called out, his voice echoing off the truck. "Sarah wants to repaint before the honeymoon." I looked at the paper in his hand again, the gift deed, and that's when I knew. I looked at him, really looked at him, and the veil finally lifted. For years I had convinced myself that my parents were just trying their best, that Brandon was just finding his way. But in that moment, staring at my brother who was trying to evict me from my own life, I understood the mechanics of my family for the first time. This is the golden child syndrome in its purest, ugliest form. My parents didn't see Brandon as a separate person. They saw him as an extension of themselves. His success was their glory. His failure was their shame. That's why they always rescued him. That's why they paid his debts, hid his mistakes, and blamed the world for his incompetence. And me, I wasn't their extension. I was their supply. I was the resource they mined to keep the golden child shining. I was the bank, the fixer, the venue. They didn't hate me. It was worse than that. They felt entitled to consume me. They genuinely believed that sacrificing my hard-earned assets to save Brandon's reputation was the natural order of things. To them, my vineyard wasn't my property. It was just another log to throw on Brandon's fire. "You're quiet," Brandon said, mistaking my silence for defeat. "Look, Nat, don't make this hard. Mom and Dad did this for us. It's a dowry. Sarah's family expects me to bring assets to the marriage. You have plenty of money. You can build another one." "A dowry," I repeated. "Yeah. So hand over the keys to the wine cellar, too. I promised Sarah's dad a tour." This wasn't just entitlement. This wasn't just a bad brother. This was a crime. And I knew exactly who to call. I didn't slam the door in Brandon's face. That would have been emotional. That would have been a reaction. I closed it gently until the latch clicked. Then I slid the deadbolt home. Through the heavy oak, I heard him laughing. He shouted something about delaying the inevitable and getting the keys to the wine cellar ready. He thought I was retreating to pack. He thought I was crying in my bedroom, accepting my defeat like the good, obedient sister I had always been. He was wrong. I wasn't retreating. I was fortifying. I walked into my office and locked that door too. I sat down at my desk, my hands perfectly steady, and picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called David. David isn't just my corporate attorney. He's the mentor who taught me that in business, whoever has the best paper trail wins. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie, it's Saturday morning. This better be good." "It's not good, David," I said, my voice cold. "It's criminal. My brother is in my driveway with a moving truck. He has a document he claims is a gift deed signed by my parents, transferring the vineyard to him. He's attempting a hostile takeover." The line went silent for a second, then the rustle of movement. "Is he violent?" "Not yet. Just arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable." "Do not open that door again," David ordered, his tone shifting from sleepy to lethal. "I'm 40 minutes out. I'm bringing Marcus." Marcus. The private investigator David kept on retainer for due diligence on high-stakes mergers. If David was bringing Marcus, he already suspected this was bigger than a family squabble. I spent the next 40 minutes in a strange state of calm. Outside, I could see Brandon pacing the driveway on the phone, looking agitated. He kicked the tire of the moving truck. He yelled at the movers. He was starting to realize that 24 hours wasn't moving fast enough for whatever timeline he was operating on. When David's black sedan crunched up the gravel drive, Brandon tried to intercept him. I watched on the monitor as David stepped out, ignored my brother's outstretched hand, and walked straight to the porch. Brandon tried to follow, but Marcus, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, stepped in his path. I opened the door just enough to let them in. David didn't waste time on pleasantries. He didn't offer a hug. He walked straight to my desk and opened his briefcase. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he said. I described the paper, the signatures, the notary stamp, the claim that it was a dowry. He texted me a photo of it yesterday. Sarah had posted it on her story, bragging about our new estate. I pulled up the screenshot I'd saved. David adjusted his glasses, leaning in to study the pixelated image on my screen. He was silent for a long time. Then he let out a low, humorless breath. "Amateurs," he muttered. "What is it?" "Look at the notary stamp," David pointed to the bottom of the screen. "It's dated for the county, but the commission number belongs to a notary who lost his license 3 years ago for fraud. I know him. He's a buddy of Brandon's from college." "So the deed is fake?" The deed is a forgery, David corrected. But that's not the worst part. He nodded to Marcus. The investigator opened a folder he'd brought in. I ran a rapid credit check and public records search on your brother and your parents while we were driving over, Marcus said. His voice was gravelly and devoid of emotion. Your brother isn't just moving in, Natalie. He's running from something. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a loan document. 3 days ago, a hard money lender, the kind that breaks legs when you don't pay, filed a lien against this property. My blood ran cold. How? The title is in my name. Not according to the paperwork they submitted, Marcus said. They used the forged gift deed to prove ownership. Your parents co-signed as guarantors, verifying the transfer was legitimate. Brandon took out a $200,000 bridge loan against your equity. $200,000, I whispered. Where is the money? Gone, Marcus said. Wired to an offshore sports betting syndicate an hour after the loan funded. Your brother didn't steal your house to live in it, Natalie. He stole it to pay off a gambling debt that was about to get him killed. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. It wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just the golden child syndrome. My parents knew. They had to know. They didn't just sign a fake deed to make him look good for the wedding. They actively participated in wire fraud and identity theft to save him from the consequences of his own addiction. They were willing to bankrupt me to leverage my hard work, my sanctuary to cover his losses. They had mortgaged my life to save his. This changes everything, David said, closing his briefcase with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is a felony. Multiple felonies. He looked at me, his eyes hard behind his glasses. We have 2 options, Natalie. We can fight this in civil court for years while they drag your name through the mud, or we can end this right now. I looked at the screen at the forged signature of the father who had told me he was proud of me only when I bought something he could use. I looked at the loan document, the price tag they had put on my existence. End it, I said. Burn it all down. David nodded and pulled out his phone. He didn't call the bank, he called the sheriff. It was exactly noon when Brandon stopped knocking and started kicking. The heavy thuds shook the frame of the front door, echoing through the hallway where I stood waiting. I could hear Sarah outside, her voice shrill and panicked, telling him to stop, but he wasn't listening. He was desperate. The loan sharks were probably expecting a confirmation of the property transfer by the end of the day, and I was the only thing standing between him and a broken kneecap. Open the door, Natalie, he screamed, the charm completely gone. I swear to God, I'll break it down. Then another car pulled up. I checked the monitor. It was my parents' SUV. They spilled out of the car, rushing toward the porch, but not to stop him. They were there to manage me. Natalie, my mother called out, her voice pitched in that reasonable, let's all be adults tone she used, to cover up chaos. Natalie opened the door. Let's just talk. We can figure this out. I looked at David. He checked his watch and nodded. It's time. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. Brandon stumbled forward, his fist raised to hammer on the wood again. When he saw me, his face twisted into a sneer. Finally, get your... He stopped. He saw David standing behind me, and then he saw the 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies stepping out from the kitchen hallway where they had been waiting for the last 10 minutes. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a special effect. What is this? My father Richard demanded, stepping up onto the porch. He looked indignant, the patriarch offended that his authority was being challenged by badges. Natalie, send them away. This is a family matter. No, Dad, I said. It's a crime scene. Ma'am, step back, the lead deputy said, moving past me. He looked at Brandon. Brandon Miller. Yes, Brandon stammered. He took a step back, bumping into the moving truck. I didn't do anything. This is my house. My parents gave it to me. That's a lie, David said, stepping onto the porch. He held up a file folder. This is the sworn affidavit from the notary whose stamp you stole. And this is the wire transfer record showing the proceeds of a fraudulent loan you took out against a property you don't own. That's a misunderstanding, my mother shrieked. She threw herself between Brandon and the deputies, her arms spread wide. We signed the deed. It's valid. We gave him the house. You can't give away what you don't own, Mrs. Miller, David said, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. Natalie holds the title. You signed a fraudulent document to facilitate a felony. That makes you accomplices, not owners. The deputy reached for Brandon. Hands behind your back, son. No, Sarah screamed, dropping her phone. We're supposed to be on our honeymoon. You can't arrest him. Brandon tried to bolt. It was a pathetic attempt. He scrambled toward the driver's side of the moving truck, but the second deputy tackled him onto the gravel driveway before he made it 3 steps. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest noise in the valley. "Natalie, stop this!" My father roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Tell them it was a mistake. He's your brother. You're ruining his life." I stood there watching them, my brother face pressed into the dirt groaning, my sister-in-law sobbing about her honeymoon, and my parents screaming at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating off pavement. They weren't angry that he committed a crime. They were angry that I exposed it. I looked at my mother weeping and clutching at the deputy's sleeve, begging him to let her baby boy go. And in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I realized why they were defending him. I realized why they would mortgage their own integrity, risk jail time, and destroy their relationship with their only successful child just to save him. It's the sunk cost fallacy of parenting. They had invested everything in Brandon. Every hope, every excuse, every dollar. They had spent 30 years building a narrative that he was special, that he was destined for greatness, that his failures were just bad luck. If they admitted even for a second that he was a criminal, a fraud, a liar, a thief, then they would have to admit that they had failed. They would have to admit that their golden child was a mirage and that their parenting strategy had produced a monster. They couldn't do it. The emotional investment was too high. They would rather destroy me, the daughter who actually thrived, than face the bankruptcy of their own ego. It was pathetic, and it was tragic. "I didn't ruin his life, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of finally speaking the truth. "He did, and you helped him. You're dead to us," my mother screamed, her mask of propriety completely gone. "Do you hear me? You are not my daughter." "I know," I said. "I haven't been your daughter for a long time. I've just been your bank." David stepped forward and handed my father a thick envelope. "What is this?" Richard spat. "That is a civil lawsuit," David said. "We are suing you and Brandon for the $85,000 in venue fees you fraudulently contracted, plus damages for the destruction of the vineyard during the wedding. And since you admitted to signing the fake deed in front of officers, we'll be adding conspiracy to commit fraud." "You're suing your own parents," my mother gasped, looking at me like I was the devil. "No," I said, turning back to the house. "I'm suing the people who tried to rob me." I walked inside and closed the door. I didn't watch them drag Brandon into the cruiser. I didn't watch my parents weeping in the driveway. I just locked the deadbolt. And for the first time in my life, the silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely self-inflicted. Brandon didn't make bail. With the flight risk posed by his offshore gambling connections and the sheer scale of the fraud, the judge wasn't interested in his charm. He's currently awaiting trial on 3 counts of wire fraud and identity theft. The golden child is looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal facility where his mother can't do his laundry. Sarah didn't stick around for the trial. She filed for an annulment exactly 4 days after the arrest. It turns out her undying love was conditional on Brandon having a $2.5 million estate to background her lifestyle. Once the illusion of wealth evaporated, so did she. As for my parents, they came to my gate one last time, about a week after the arrest. They weren't screaming anymore. They were begging. They asked me to drop the civil suit to help them pay for Brandon's defense attorney. I didn't even open the gate. I spoke to them through the intercom. "You made your choice," I told them. "You bet the house on Brandon. Now you have to pay the marker." They had to sell their own home, the house I grew up in, to cover the legal fees and the judgment from my lawsuit. They are currently renting a 2-bedroom apartment across town. I heard through the grapevine that my father has finally stopped bragging about his successful children. It's been 3 months since the wedding that wasn't. The harvest came in last week. The Pinot Noir grapes were smaller than usual because of the damage from the party, but the sugar content is perfect. It's going to be a vintage year. I'm sitting on my back porch now, watching the sunset turn the hills purple. I have a glass of my own wine in my hand. I changed the locks, installed a new security gate, and hired a permanent groundskeeper who doubles as security. For a long time, I was afraid of this silence. I was afraid that if I cut them off, I would feel empty. I thought losing my family would break me. But as I sit here breathing in the cool evening air, I realize something. I didn't lose a family. I lost a liability. I lost the anxiety of waiting for the next phone call, the next demand, the next crisis I was expected to pay for. I lost the heavy, suffocating weight of being the supply for their ego. The silence isn't lonely. It's peaceful. It's the sound of a life that finally completely belongs to me. I raise my glass to the empty driveway. to the golden child who finally tarnished, and to the villain who survived. If you've ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to survive in your own, share this video. You are not alone and you are not wrong. Hit subscribe for more stories about taking back what's yours.